Hi, my name is Ramona, and I'm a librarian. Today I want to share with our young boys and girls some resources on poverty. Poverty is one of the greatest issues that we face in our world today. We're going to start with a book called The Hard Times Jar. This book was written by Ethel Foreman Smothers. It has a copyright date of 2003, 32 pages, and it is a fiction book. Smothers demonstrates in this book that hard work does pay off, and we will see that when we read the book called The Hard Times Jar. The book begins with an 8-year-old named Emma. Emma and her family had moved from Florida to Pennsylvania to harvest crops as migrant workers. Emma loved books. She just loved reading. But they could not afford any books because they didn't have money. The store-bought books, Emma would call them. So what Emma would do is she would write her own books. She using brown paper bags. She would write her own stories. She had a little brother who was nosy, a little bit nosy. So to keep him out of her book, she would use a safety pin to keep her book closed. Sometimes Emma would be so caught up in writing her book that she would forget that she's supposed to be watching or babysitting her younger brother and sister. Or she's supposed to be picking apples and she's somewhere off writing. Mom would call and say, "Emma, do you want me to hide the pencil?" Immediately, Emma would get back to work because she loved writing. Emma would work hard at picking those apples, because the money that she got, she put it in the Hard Times jar. And perhaps maybe one day she would be able to buy her own store-bought book. Now, the illustrator uses earthy browns and green colors to convey the family's one-room home and the lush orchards where they work. That is where they pick the apples. One day, Emma's mother came to her and she said, "You won't be coming to work with us tomorrow. You're going to go to school." Emma was saddened because she didn't want to go to school. She said, "If I go to school, I'm not going to be able to get any money. And if I don't get any money, then I'm not going to be able to buy my store-bought book." But nevertheless, Emma had to go to school. So upon going to her school, the first day she met Ms. Miller. Ms. Miller was her teacher. She was a nice lady. Emma said she looked like buttermilk because she was white. As a matter of fact, when Miss Miller introduced her to the other students, all of the students were white. They looked just like Miss Miller, Emma said. Emma had never seen white students before because down south, they didn't go to school together. Emma was a little saddened, but she knew she had to go to school. One day, her teacher, Miss Miller, took her into the library. Emma couldn't believe her eyes. The books, from floor to ceiling, nothing but books. Miss Miller said, "Emma, you can read the books during our reading period, but you cannot take any of the books home." Emma was elated, excited, happy. She read all the time. She could not wait for the reading period. But one day, Emma does something wrong. She decides she wants to take 2 of the books home, even though the teacher said you cannot do it, but she did it anyway. She tucked it in the 2 books in her backpack and she took them home. And that night she pulled them out, but Mom saw them. Mom says, "Emma, what is that you have?" Emma said, "It's just 2 books. I mean, they have so many books at school. They're not going to even miss these 2. But Mom scolded Emma and she said, "You will have to take those books back and you're going to have to let Miss Miller know what you did." So when Emma got to school the next day, she stood in front of Miss Miller looking down at her feet because she was ashamed. She was embarrassed. She didn't want to tell Miss Miller what she did, but she did tell her. Miss Miller said, "You can read the books, but like I told you before, the books cannot leave the school." So Emma apologized and she owned up to what she had done. She was sorry. When she got home, Mom was very proud of Emma and she gave Emma 5 coins out of the Hard Times jar. In the drawer were coins of every kind, pennies, nickels, quarters, and dimes. Emma got 5 coins. I wonder what she's going to do with her coins. Let's read the book, The Hard Times Jar by Ethel Footman Smothers, and find out what Emma does with her coins. Our next book on poverty is called A Shelter in Our Car. This book was written by Monica Gunning, copyright date 2003. The genre is a fiction and it has 32 pages. A Shelter in Our Car. This book is about a poor family who didn't have a place to stay and they lived out of their car. Let's find out what happened in the story. This is a suspenseful book about a girl and her mother who lived in the car. The illustrator uses the color red, beaming from a police car lights along with the blaring sirens. The mother would try to park the car in areas that she didn't think anybody would notice so they can get a good night's rest. They didn't have a place to stay because they had no money, so they lived in the car. It was obvious that the mom loved the daughter and the daughter loved the mom. The text provides reassurances to the readers as the characters together face challenge after challenge. In the mornings, when it was time to go to school, they would use the restrooms in the park. Before Zeddy is the little girl's name, before she went to school. And before the mother went in search of a job. Every day, the mom would go and look for a job. Sometimes she'd get a job where she'd make just a little bit of money, just enough that they can buy some food, because they ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches all the time. But when mom made money, they were able to get hot dogs and some other things. At school, though, because Zeddy was poor and the students knew that they didn't have any money and they would live out of the car, they would tease her and call her Junk Car Zeddy. Junk Car Zeddy. Junk Car Zeddy. And they would pull her pigtails. And she was very sad. So one day, one of the bullies pulled her pigtail real hard and called her junkyard. Where's that junk car? Where's that junk car? So she ran away from the bullies and she became separated from her mother. When her mother pulled up in their car, and remember, they slept in the car, so there was a lot of clothes in the car. All their personal belongings was in the car because that's where they lived. They had no money. So Zeddy got lost and she began to cry because when the mom pulled up to the school to pick her up, Zeddy wasn't where her mom could see her. The mom didn't know that she was being bullied and she had run down the street. So the mom drove off. The mom went looking for Zeddy. She was scared, she was frightened, and she got some other people to help her to look for her. So mom doubled back and came back to the school, and she found Zeddy talking with a police officer. The police officer was so nice to her. He wasn't like the other mean police officers that made them move when they couldn't find anywhere else to park their car so they could sleep. So when she found her, they were so happy together. And she shared the good news with Zeddy. She said, I have made enough money today that we're going to actually stay in a hotel tonight. As a matter of fact, I was offered a job today. We don't have to stay in our car anymore. So let's just see if they find a place to stay and what happens after that. Does life get better? Let's just see by reading the book, A Shelter in Our Car by Monica Gunning. I loved it. Our next resource on poverty is called On Our Street, Our First Talk About Poverty. Now this book was written by Jillian Roberts and Jamie Kasap. It is a nonfiction book with a copyright date of 2018 with 32 pages. The world outside of our homes can be so unfamiliar and so confusing. When a child observes someone living on the street, their questions can initiate an important conversation about poverty. Why do people live on the street? What is poverty? Poverty means that a person does not have enough money for food, for clothing, and shelter. But poverty can also mean not having a good job, or being unable to go to school, or even to the doctor. This book gently introduces and compassionately looks at homelessness and poverty. It explores the realities of people living in inadequate resources. And that means they don't have a home to stay in. And sometimes we see people living on the street, sleeping on benches in the park, or what have you. This book uses age-appropriate language to address mental illness, homelessness, and refugee status, as they are all connected to this issue. We see sometimes people they're sick and they develop some mental issues that cause them to just wander and drift and become homeless. And also refugees, when they leave their native country, they come in search of a better place. And because they don't have any relatives, or they don't have any money because they're new, they sometimes find themselves living outdoors and living in poverty. Two girls in this book are walking to school, and they see a man on the ground. And he has all of his belongings, all of his clothes, his shoes, everything that belongs to him. They're all on the ground with him. And one of the girls asks, she says, why would he sleep outside? She does not understand that the man is living in a poverty situation. He has no money. This book attempts to answer a child's question about homelessness and poverty. It is exceptionally well done, a very good book. The mix of real pictures and illustrations helps to make the information understandable and relatable to our kids. This book mentions one powerful quote, and this is something we always want to remember with our students. Don't ask kids what they want to do when they grow up. Let's ask them what problem do they want to solve when they grow up. In this book, it also included a lot of ideas, a lot of suggestions on how kids can get involved. We even have some links to organizations that will help you. How can you help as students? How can you help a family that has a need? They have no food, they have no clothing, they have no shelter. Let's read the book On Our Street. Our first talk about poverty by Jillian Roberts and Jamie K. Sapp to find out what can we do to help. The next resource is called What is Given from the Heart. This book is by Patricia McKissick. It has a copyright date of 2017. Its genre is fiction, and it has 40 pages. I love this book. It's about a boy named James Otis and his mother. They were very poor, as they had lost everything after their dad died. James Otis said his dad went to sleep on the porch one day and he never woke up. He said his mom cried because she didn't have a suit to bury him in. They were living in a pretty decent house at first, but after Dad died, they had to move to a run-down shack. They left the farm, and now they're living in a shack. But Mom believed that when you do stuff from the heart, it is going to be good. Something good is going to happen for you or to you. The pastor explained, they went to church, and the pastor said one of the members had lost everything in the fire. A little girl and her mom, they lost everything. So he was asking that the people would contribute something to the family, something of value to the family. Mom thought long and hard about what she could contribute. James Otis thought long and hard as well. He didn't know what could he give to the little girl. What could I give? Mom decided to take her best tablecloth and make it into an apron for the lady at church who had lost everything in a fire. She gave up her beautiful white tablecloth. She made it into a beautiful apron. James Otis, on the other hand, thought of many things. He even thought of a rock that he had gotten. He said, well, no, she won't want a rock. He even thought of a ribbon he had won in some contest. But he said, no, that wouldn't mean anything to her. It means something to me, but it wouldn't mean anything to her, so he wouldn't give her that. So he couldn't think about what to give the little girl. Finally, James Otis got an idea. He got out some paper, some crayons, and some pencils, and he began to write a book. The textured background in this book, it bleeds through the edges to include spreads from the backdrop for the folk art illustration. There are depictions of the modest neighborhood and touching close-ups of the boy and his mom in loving embrace. Sarah is the name of the little girl who James Otis was going to give the gift to. The story of the joy of giving depicts one's own needs is a must-have. This is such a good book. It teaches us how to give to others even when we don't have a whole lot. So in spite of the fact that James Otis and his mom had little, they gave what they had. And the mother of the little girl that received the gifts was so excited. She cried tears of joy because she could not believe that the people cared that much for her, that they gave her such a gift. A big box with all kinds of toys and foods and stuff she could use since she lost everything in her fire. This was a wonderful book, and it teaches us how to help others in their time of need. Again, this book is called What is Given from the Heart, and I'm going to add that it reaches the heart. Let's read this book by Patricia McKissick. Very good book. Our last book is called Poverty and Hunger, and this book was written by Louise Spilsbury. Has a copyright date of 2017, and it is a non-fiction book with 32 pages. This book is beautifully illustrated, and it takes a look at today's biggest issues and explains the crisis of poverty in our world. It discusses questions like, what is poverty and hunger? How does poverty affect people? How can poverty affect us? Who is poor and hungry? Why are they poor and hungry? How can we help as a people? How can schools help as a people? The book uses relatable comparisons, carefully researched text, and striking illustrations to help our young students understand the many difficulties that children just like them face in the world today. We have so many students that are dealing with poverty. They have no home. They have no school clothes. The parents have no money to buy them. It also helps them to begin to understand the way others struggle with poverty and hunger, and also teaches us ways that we can help. How can we help when we see somebody who is hungry? How can we help when we see someone who needs some clothes or some shoes? What can we do? Where there are no appropriate words to describe the issues, the illustrator Kai uses powerful illustrations that help children to visualize the people impacted by poverty, hunger, war, racism, and more. The book again is entitled Poverty and Hunger. Let's find out more about what we can do to help with this issue, the issue of poverty and hunger, by reading this book by Louise Spilsbury. Thank you.